In the month of December 2022, where I hit my first 10K month in my agency, I was booking around 3 to 5 sales calls per day purely through cold email. And so in this video, I'm going to break down my entire outreach process in detail, including how I find my leads, how I qualify my leads, what tools I use to automate my outreach, and what steps I took to actually improve my call booking rate from 1% to around 5 to 6% in the month of December. So over the course of the 2 months where I first implemented my cold email strategy, which was November and December, I closed around 8 clients using this exact cold email strategy, which I'm about to show you. So let's start with lead generation, right? Where do you actually find a list of leads to reach out to? So most of the time, I'm just going to be completely honest, you're going to have to pay for your leads. Now, there are free ways to go about this, but a lot of the time is either very manual or the quality is just very low, or you're going to be reaching out to the same list that's been reached out to by pretty much everyone else out there. So the tool that I used was called Built With. I've mentioned this many times on my channel, but basically it's just a technology lookup site where you can basically buy a bunch of leads that use a specific platform like Shopify, Kajabi, I don't know what else there is. Now, I know there are some good alternatives out there like Phantom Buster. You can basically get a bunch of free lists from there. Apollo, I think, is another good one. But again, I haven't used these personally, so I can't really speak to how effective they are. One thing I will say is that with Built With is that a lot of the websites either weren't working or they're just very low quality leads. So I did have to hire a VA to basically screen through those leads, which I will talk about now. So let's talk about lead cleaning. First of all, you want to qualify your leads. And there's many ways you can go about this, and it really depends on your service and your niche. Like for me, I was targeting info products or coaching. So what I had to do was actually check for a few things. So I was checking whether people had a Facebook pixel. And I would say, I don't know how important this actually was, but for me, it was kind of like an indicator that people were actually trying to market their business actively. And for those of you who don't know what a Facebook pixel is, it's basically the tracking software, whatever, that you can install into your website to basically use Facebook ads to track all your data and that kind of stuff. And the next thing I checked for, of course, is whether the business was actually selling a course or some type of coaching. Because even if their platform was running like Kajabi, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're actively selling a course at the moment. So that's another thing I told my VA to check for. Now, some other things you can check for, like it could be whether they have a social media following. You could be checking whether they're actually actively running ads. You can also check whether they have a decent amount of website traffic, right? Using tools like SEMrush or SimilarWeb. I haven't done that yet, but I think that's a pretty good way to check whether your prospect is of a certain size. Now, the next thing I did for my cold email process was actually verifying the emails of the owners. Now, of course, a lot of the time, you're not going to be able to find the actual owner's email. It's going to be just a general like support or info email, but you do want to make sure you try to find the owner's email as much as possible. And the way you do this is one tool you can use is snove.io. I talk about this in my other videos, but basically it's a Chrome extension you can install where you can find the people who have an email on that specific domain. And most of the time, you're going to find a bunch of first names with like name@domain.com. And you basically want to find the one that matches the owner's first name. The next tool you want to use, that I use at least, is NeverBounce. So this is a really useful tool, and basically it helps you verify whether an email is valid or not. In other words, if you send an email to that address, is it actually like a legit email address that's going to receive your email? And this is really important because when you're doing cold email at mass, one of the biggest problems you're going to face is deliverability. You want to make sure that your emails are actually landing in inboxes. Otherwise, your domain and your IP are going to get marked as spam. So the way NeverBounce works is pretty straightforward. Basically enter a bunch of emails. I think it's like 10 at a time, and it tells you whether that email is actually legit or not. Now, you do have to pay for credits. I think it cost me like $50 for around 10,000 credits, which is totally worth it in my opinion. Now, I think you can get free credits, like so you can call like test credits. All you have to do is like email their support and just ask them to basically, try out their platform, which usually they'll say yes to. And finally, of course, I did hire a VA, as I mentioned earlier, and my VA basically helps me, qualify these leads and perform all the steps I just told you about. So now let's talk about the actual email warm-up and the prep. So the first thing you need is a custom email domain. Now, I wouldn't say this is 100% necessary. Like you can get by with doing outreach with a Gmail account, but personally, I haven't done that myself. It kind of looks unprofessional in my opinion, but it definitely does work, and it does save you a little bit of money. And I think the other problem with using Gmail accounts is that a lot of the email automation tools don't work with Gmail accounts specifically. So the first thing you want to do when you're warming up is to use an email warm-up tool. So there's tools like LemWarm, Warmbox, Gmass is a free option, but it's a little less convenient. But yeah, the warm-up services are pretty affordable. I think they're like 20 to 30 bucks a month, but you definitely want to use these if you're cold emailing a bunch of people. So you want to do the warm-up process for at least 30 days. I think you want to maybe go for closer to the 40 or 45, but 30 at the absolute minimum. And in your settings, you want to start with 1 to 5 emails per day, and you can gradually bring this up to around like 30 to 50 per day. I think you can also go around to 100 depending on like how the email warm-up system works. But usually the recommended settings will be the best to take, but just make sure you don't go like too crazy with how many emails you start sending using these tools. And finally, you want to use an email blacklist checker. So this is very important for making sure that your domain and your IP and all that kind of stuff are actually going to make it to the inbox of the people you send emails to. So there's a few websites you can use here. First one is mailtester.com. There's Mail Genius, and another one I really like is MX Toolbox. This is basically how you check whether your IP or your domain are blacklisted. And the way Mail Tester and Mail Genius work is that you basically send a test email. It'll give you like a score, and it'll tell you what, like how likely your your email is going to land in spam. So now let's talk about the actual outreach process, starting with the outreach message itself. So I already kind of talked about your outreach message in my other videos, but I figured I would break it down in exact detail what I was doing with my outreach script and all that kind of stuff. So first and most important part of your outreach message is your offer. That's never going to change. Now this could be something like, we'll guarantee you 20 to 25 appointments. This could be, we'll guarantee you 3 to 5K in revenue in the first month. Just some type of result, or you could say like, hey, we're going to get you this many views. Just something to show that you can actually deliver them results, and you're not just some random like, hey, just hire me to do jack shit for your business. Now, one thing I do want to make very clear is that you want to make your offer unique. Like, sure, it's good to have a good offer, which is very important, but you also want your offer to stand out in some way. And there are a few ways to make that happen, right? First of all, it could be the actual result itself. Instead of guaranteeing like 20 to 25 appointments like everyone else does, you could say, hey, we'll guarantee you like 50 to 100 appointments in like, I don't know, a month, which is, again, this is probably the hardest thing to do if you're a beginner, guaranteeing really good results. So there are other ways you can go about this. Another one is a free trial. You can also do a full money back guarantee, or you could just really offer like a new mechanism. Like, one thing I can say is that like when you say that you offer something besides Facebook ads, people tend to listen a little bit more than you say, hey, we use Facebook ads to drive more leads to your business, because literally every agency has said that before. So if there's anything about your offer that differentiates it from other people's, try to mention it in your outreach message. Next, let's talk about personalization. Now, personally, I've done quite well with using personalization. I haven't really tried sending too many emails without it, but what I can say, it definitely makes a difference, and I definitely do get higher response rates. Now, obviously, this is not like a super simple or hands-off process if you're doing it yourself, right? You're gonna have to research each individual prospect. You're gonna have to like look into maybe what they're doing, what's going on in their lives. Like, the worst thing you can do with personalization is to make it sound generic and sounds like you just like basically didn't put any work into it, right? Like if you say some shit like, hey, I like the look of your website, it's like, yeah, thanks. Yeah, the way I approached it is that, I hired someone called a personalized first line writer. This is basically a VA who will help you do the research and write individual lines for every single email and every single prospect that you reach out to. Now, this is, I would say, somewhat scalable. Like, each VA can usually handle around like 25 to 30 emails per day. But once you start scaling up, if you're sending like 50 to 100 emails per day, this is where it starts to get a little bit iffy, and I wouldn't recommend it unless you are willing to hire like 2 to 3 different VAs, which can be a pain to manage. So honestly, if you're sending 25 to 30 emails per day that are personalized, that should be more than enough to land you your first handful of clients anyway. So next, let's talk about a pretty interesting part of your outreach message, which is the differentiation. So this is very, very important, because I think people always talk about like your offer, they always talk about like the guarantee, personalization, but there's a difference between differentiation and personalization. Obviously, like, personalization is a form of differentiation, but it's also the way that you write your copy. I can't tell you how many times I've actually received compliments from prospects who have no idea who I am, just telling me that they enjoyed my outreach message. And this can go a long way if you're like clever or funny, or just have something that sets you apart in the way that you write your email. Now, here is the absolute best way to basically add some easy differentiation to your email. And that is using the PS line, right? This is probably the most read part of an email besides the very first line. And even if it's not the very first line that they read, it's going to be the one that they focus on the most. And I can tell you right now, like, the PS line has done me wonders when it comes to getting replies and read messages. So there are many things you can do with the PS line, right? You can actually put in your offer, you can put in your personalization, you can put something, witty or funny, or just something interesting that sets you apart, right? And again, most of these will work really well. I found it to improve my conversion rates by a lot. So use it in whatever creative way you can think of. Another really cool kind of differentiation I've used, and I learned this from Charlie Morgan from his YouTube channel, and that is to actually ask for permission to pitch your offer. Now, there are many ways you can do this. You don't actually have to wait 2 emails. You can actually do it in the same email. But one thing you want to make sure of is, when you're asking for permission, you still want to hint at the type of offer you have, right? Like, you want to say, hey, just want to see if you're down to be pitched by me. But, basically it's about getting more customers for a business. And then you can see what their response is to that. But yeah, those are just some ideas. Those are basically the 2 kind of main differentiating factors that I use. And this is basically the exact structure that I use to get 3 to 5 sales calls per day using just cold email. Well, actually, I forgot one important piece, which is your call to action, right? This is obviously quite important. So, you might be asking someone to reply to you, getting someone to book a call with you. Personally, I recommend not asking for the call right away, because a lot of the time people may feel like kind of repelled when you ask them to, basically just click on your link or to hop on a call with you. I don't think it's a huge problem, but I personally like to aim to get a reply instead. So that way I can kind of smooth talk my prospects into actually booking a call with me. Because the most important thing you want to do with outreach is to actually confirm intent. Once someone shows interest, then you can basically, work your magic, because they're a lot warmer than someone who basically hasn't replied to you at all. But the problem is, if you try to ask for their call right away, you might lose a lot of people who may have been interested in the first place, but didn't get a chance to talk to you. So how much outreach you could How much outreach should you send every single day? So personally, I sent around 25 to 30 a day before December, but in the month of December, because I only had 2 weeks to hit my 10K per month goal, I started sending 50 per day. And this is not including follow-ups. So I would say anything higher than 50 per day, you start kind of running the risk of getting your domain or your IP getting blacklisted, or just getting ruined in terms of quality. But if you do want to go for volume, then what I would recommend is getting at least 2 to 3 burner domains and only setting around 30 emails per day on each of them. And again, this is without follow-up. So including follow-up, you'll be sending around like 100, 150, even 200 per day if you start increasing the volume. So now let's talk about the actual follow-ups, right? Like what do you actually say in the follow-up messages? So personally, first of all, I would usually only send around 2 to 3 follow-ups because I didn't want to spam them. I don't really have like, the best practices when it comes to follow-ups, but what I will say is that you absolutely need to follow up. You can argue like 3 follow-ups versus 5 follow-ups, but you have to do them no matter what. Because I would say like, I think 30 to 40% of my sales calls actually came from the second, third, or fourth email. And so how would I actually write these? So the first follow-up is super chill. It's like, hey, just want to check in, see if you're busy. I know you're busy. Hit me up. The second one, now for my first campaign or for my first few campaigns, my second follow-up was actually my last email to them. So again, you can just kind of like be very chill about it. Be like, hey, if you're not interested, totally get it. Like, just let me know if you ever want to chat about this. Personally, I am now going to increase the number of follow-ups I do for my outreach because I think there's a lot of potential to basically capture more interest by providing different types of messages. Like maybe you have case studies, maybe you have more results, or maybe you can send like a meme or something, just something to basically try to trigger your prospects' emotions and their interest in different ways. But the bottom line is you have to follow up no matter what. So now let's talk about tools and automation, right? This is very, very important when it comes to cold email because there's just no way you're going to send like high volume cold emails on your own manually. So the tool that I used was Lemlist. I talk about this a lot in my other videos. Another tool that is popping up a lot right now is instantly.ai. It seems to be a lot cheaper. You can manage like a bunch of several domains and to basically warm up for several domains at the same time, which I think is super cool. And I think it's a lot more affordable than Lemlist. So personally, I think I'm going to be switching to instantly.ai, but I haven't tested it yet. So for now, just know that these tools work and you can choose whichever one you think is best for you, but you do need a tool. Otherwise it's just going to be impossible to manage all the follow-ups, all the sending, and basically tracking all your metrics. Now on the topic of tracking, you have to track everything, right? I talk about this in pretty much every video where I talk about outreach, but you have to track and measure everything, every single piece of outreach that you do. Now I used to do this manually. Like I used to have like a Google sheet where I would actually track every single message I sent out, every follow-up I sent out, and I would track every single metric, every single conversion metric at every process of the funnel. So these are things like your open rate, your positive reply rate, your call booking rate, and your closing rate. So when it comes to open rate, you want to at least hit a 70 to 80%. I would personally aim for at least 80%. And once you hit that number, you can basically turn off the tracking tool for whatever tool you're using, right? I think Snope.io has a status tracking tool where it shows whether your message was opened. If you use Lemlist or some other type of automation tool, those will also tell you whether your emails were opened, but you can also turn those off. Personally, the idea is you want to turn those off once you hit the 80% open rate because it does hurt your deliverability a little bit when you have the tracking pixels installed or attached to your emails. So now let's talk about positive reply rate. So personally, I actually don't care too much about positive reply rate. And the reason for that is because a lot of people do tend to express interest, but they also have no intent of actually booking a call no matter what you say. So for me, the only metric I actually cared about after the open rate was the call booking rate. And obviously this will be influenced by you and like in terms of how you reply to people, how you kind of like explain things to people, because people will ask questions. They will ask you, send you their website. They will ask you to tell you more about, your results or who you are or what your offer is. And you do kind of have to like maneuver around these questions to make sure that you can get people onto the call to speak with you. Normally I would aim for, I would say a decent call booking rate is like 2 to 3%. So every 100 emails you send, you get around 2 to 3 booked calls. Now I would say this is decent, but if you're just starting out, I would say at least aim for a minimum of 1%. 1% isn't like terrible by any means, but I would say if you want to get good results and you actually want to scale your emails, 1% I would say is the absolute minimum in terms of getting booked calls for your cold email. And finally, when it comes to your actual sales closing rate, I would aim for around 20% close rates. Even 10% is not the worst thing in the world, especially if you're just starting out. But again, this is not so much to do with your outreach and your cold emailing, but your actual sales skills. So yeah, that's pretty much, the full detailed breakdown of what I did to get 8 to 10 clients in 2 months. It's how I scaled to 10K per month. And it definitely works. Like cold email absolutely works, especially if the business owner you're targeting is someone who works online a lot. For me, it was. I know this may not work as well for, other business types, but if cold email is a viable option for your industry, for your niche, for your service, then absolutely, it definitely works. And if you follow this process, I'm pretty sure you'll get at least like a handful of clients if you just continually improve your metrics and just try to implement everything I talked about in this video. Yeah, hope it helped and see you guys in the next video.